All right, we're gonna jump into this next section, and this is all about equipment. And this is where almost everybody gets focused on or hung up on. Believe me, it is not that complicated. Take a deep breath. We're gonna get through this, and I'm gonna make it very simple on what you can be doing, probably either with no budget, a little bit of budget, and like unlimited funds, so you just wanna get the best stuff possible. All right, let's get to it. Before I start listing off some different equipment options and what you should be looking for, most of you are probably gonna be recording your podcast at either your computer, because you're doing remote interviews over some software, talking to your guest or your co-host, or you're gonna be sitting in the same room as them, either next to them, and they're going to be mic'd up. Okay, those are the two different ways I'm going to be discussing. So now that we got that out of the way, let's jump into the most important piece of equipment you're going to need while recording a podcast, and that is your microphone. And unfortunately, not all mics are going to be cheap. Okay, and I actually will say that most mics on the internet regularly priced under $50 are probably not worth it. A lot of them are knockoffs off the really expensive brands that do have really good audio quality coming from them. Don't fall for those Amazon ads for really cheap mics. Stay on the path of good brands, because they're going to guarantee you a good microphone. And another thing, before we go shopping, I'm going to show you some of these mics on Amazon. There are two types of connections for microphones. Okay, you have USB connections and you have XLR connections. You can see on this microphone right here, if I pull this up, that you have a USB right here and you have an XLR cable, which I'm using the XLR right now. Okay, XLR up to this point records better audio. USB or USB-C has been getting better recently, but do not record as good of audio quality versus the XLR. Now, to use the XLR connection, you're gonna have to buy a separate device to record that audio. It has to receive it and then either transmit it to your computer or record it locally in that device, which I will include those devices at the end of this section. Now, USB or USB-C doesn't require that, and that can plug straight into your computer and you can record with almost any audio software on there. Okay, it makes it very easy to use. Zoom, QuickTime, whatever it may be, Logic, which is what I use. It's instantaneous. All right, it's very easy to use. So most of the mics I'm going to be discussing can include both of those. All right, there are solely USB mics and there are solely XLR mics. Now the first mic I'm going to show you is the Samson Q2U, and it's probably the closest to a mic under $50 right now. It's on sale for $60. It's usually around $70. I would recommend this mic to be your first intro if you're just like, I just need a microphone that sounds okay and it's fairly cheap. This is probably what I would do. You can handhold it. You can connect it USB or through XLR connection if you want to get better audio eventually. Hook it right up to your computer and you can sit on a stand. Again, you can hold it. It's a very good sounding mic for the budget. So that's the first one I'm going to recommend if you're just trying to get started. The next one I'm going to recommend, the Rode Pod mic is what I would recommend. It's $200, so it's the next step up probably. But these mics are taking over the internet. I've seen some of the biggest people in the industry working with these mics. They sound awesome for their price. I feel like Rode did us dirty, or people that I help dirty, because there's two different versions. You got the Pod mic for $100. You got the Pod mic USB. And I actually think the Pod mic USB looks better as black, but that's my opinion. The $100 version only has XLR connection, which you have to buy a separate device to record with, and it's better audio. But for the USB and the XLR, it's an extra $100. Unless you're absolutely already in an understanding that you're going to use XLR and you already have a device ready to go, then you can consider this guy. But you're probably going to have to buy the USB-C to get going, and that's what I would recommend, is the $200 one, because again, it gives you more flexibility on what you can use. What's nice about Rode, the brand, is actually, you can see in this picture, you actually can hook these up to your phone and record, which is actually really helpful. The next one is not so much of a big jump. It's the introduction into the Shure line, which is probably the best mics that I've worked with, and this is the Shure MV7, and that's actually what this mic is right here. If you can see in this video, it's this mic, and this is the Shure MV7, okay? These guys probably sound the closest to the best mic, which I'm going to show here in a second, and it's got USB and XLR connections. Now you can see in this picture, you can have it above you, or you can put it on something like this so it sits in front of you. Now for $50 more, you probably can get a little bit better sounding than maybe the Rode Pod mic. However, I would buy this mic if your long-term game is to eventually move into buying the most expensive mic. Then this will give you an intro into how to use this brand and how it feels. Okay. Now the last mic I'm going to use, which almost everybody has seen on the internet, and that is the SM7B. But for $400, you get this one mic. You're probably going to have to buy a preamp for this. Okay. And not only that, it is only XLR. So you're going to have to buy an audio device, a preamp, and that's probably going to cost you another $200 to use this one mic. Now, if you buy it again, I think with the preamp, you can have 2 ports in it as well as the audio device. They do sell a version with the preamp built in, which I believe is this guy. Okay, and it's $500. But honestly, for most of you, yes, this mic looks really cool. You don't need it. All right, let's not look at the shiny object syndrome, and let's look at what's more affordable. And I would say either get the Samson or the Pod mic. And that's it. That's mics. That's mics for podcasting that sit in your camera on your camera angle. You can see them and they give you great audio quality. Now what's great about these types of mics is you can also use them for other types of content, not just podcasts. So like live streaming, these are great for. All the big streamers will have similar mics. And YouTube videos, if you don't mind the mic being in your camera shot, also great for that as well. All right, that's audio. Take a deep breath. We got through that. Don't be overwhelmed. That's probably where I would spend my money. The next thing we're going to talk about is cameras, or how you're going to capture the video. And yes, you do need video for your podcast so you can cut up into multiple pieces of content that you can market over social media platforms. Now, the first thing I'm going to recommend is actually probably going to cost you $0, and that is your phone. Okay, pull out your phone right now. If you're watching this video, pull it out. It's most likely going to be an iPhone. Okay, I got an iPhone. Most people will have either an Android or a Chrome that advertise that they have better cameras than iPhones, I feel like. Then use those. Okay, maybe buy a tripod for it that can either sit on its own or clip onto the desk. Okay, use your phone. It can record pretty great video quality. All right, and you don't have to buy an expensive camera, because the next step up, you're gonna have to splash some money, more than any one of these mics, except for maybe the Shure SM7B. And plus, Apple has made it so easy to connect iPhones to their computers now. You can use your iPhone as a webcam with just by plugging it in through the cord. And if you're sitting in the room with another person, you both can use your phone, set it up on tripods, and record the episode, okay? Just make sure you have enough storage, because you might run into the issue when you're recording, you run out of storage, you don't get the recording, all right? That's a common problem. But if you're doing this course and you're doing a refresh and you're like, you know what, I want to splash some money on a camera, then I'm going to recommend the Sony ZV-E10. All right, let me pull it up. So the Sony EV10 is probably the greatest camera for people starting YouTube channels or actually starting to gain some traction and want to consider being a content creator more seriously. Now, the reason why this camera is awesome is because it has the body of a cheaper camera, okay, but it has the option to switch out the lens for a way nicer lens what it's capable of actually probably doing. But you can buy this camera without the lens for a cheaper price, for $100 cheaper, or it'll come with this basic lens. But it gives you the option to eventually evolve that, and that process is very important when you go down that road of understanding DSLR cameras, because most of the time the lens can actually be more expensive than the camera. I would recommend this one. If you haven't noticed, I love Sony cameras, all right? Because the next Sony camera I'm going to recommend as the next step up would be the Sony FX30, all right? And this camera is kind of shaking the world because it's a pretty affordable camera for what it can do. Now, this is probably the next step up before getting to really expensive cameras, all right? And it just comes with a base. You could probably combine it with another lens. This camera is awesome. All right, it's probably the best one for all content creators right now, and it looks fantastic. After this, you're probably gonna look at cameras that are $5,000, $6,000. This camera can be comparable to anything up to pretty much, I'd say, $4,000 or $5,000. Everything above that are probably going to be like studio grade, okay? And you don't need that to record your podcast. So I would say this is probably top of the line. And another thing to keep in mind is that if you are wanting multi-camera looks, which if you're going to have in-person recordings, which I highly recommend, you're going to have multiple cameras, okay? So buying all these can be really expensive, all right? So just remember, keep that in mind. That's why I highly recommend starting with phones. You can use multiple phones and just record them and edit them all in post-production. So keep that in mind when looking at cameras, and that's pretty much it. Simple. And lastly, we're going to discuss lighting. The awesome thing about this is it's similar to cameras. It's going to cost you $0 in the beginning. All right. You know what you're going to use? Natural light. If you got a window, position your set to that to be your source of light that will fill everything, and you're good. Natural light is the best light you can use before spending some big bucks. If you want to spend some money, then I'm going to recommend the Amaran 60D. Now, that's probably going to be your cheapest option for starting off with a softbox light. What is a softbox light? It is a smaller light that you put a huge dome on and it diffuses light. I'm using one right above me right now, and it looks pretty similar to natural light. You can actually even manipulate it a little bit more than like a window, and so you actually can have more control because you can't control the sun. This is the one I have a couple of these. These are awesome lights. Start off with $143, but you cannot use it just like this. You're gonna have to buy a dome with it, okay? And the dome that I like to use is this one, and this because it has the honeycomb look, which will give you a more honed in on look of where the light is being diffused on. I have the exact same setup right now. You can't see that light going behind me, okay? So because I wanted a darker look, I want to be able to see these LED lights behind me. That's what that gives you. And you also can rip off the honeycomb if you want to splash more light around. Also another great option to do, okay? $84, so you're going to spend about $300, close to it, on this setup. Actually, not $300. I just can't do math. It's going to cost you a little over $200, all right? Now, the other thing I'm going to recommend is if you're recording with somebody like sitting on the couch, like I have a setup behind me, then you actually can use one light to give you all the light you need, okay? And this is what you would use to do that. It diffuses light a little bit differently than the previous dome that I showed you, and this is called a lantern, okay? A lantern softbox. And basically what it does is the light will come on, and it's like a lantern, but it's not so zoned in. It'll splash light all over the place, okay? And it'll brighten up the entire room. So if you put it in between you and your co-host or guest, it actually can give you plenty of light. And this one's gonna be $150 for that as well. Okay, the last piece of equipment I'm actually going to talk about is, like I mentioned before, for XLR cameras to actually be recorded. So I love to use actually the Focusrite Scarletts, which I'll show. This actually is where your XLR cord will go into, and you'll have some control over the gain of it and be able to control the volume of what's coming in. If you have somebody that talks really low, you can be able to control it. And these will actually plug into your computer, and you can record with Logic, Audacity, Audition, whatever your premium audio software will be. And they also come in a couple different editions. If you wanted to come with one of their mics and headphones, if you want to buy the 4i4, which I think features a couple of different things. They have a solo, so if you're only doing remote stuff or solo stuff, it's a little bit cheaper. Now, if you really have shiny object syndrome and you're like, I want the best audio device possible, then you can get the Rodecaster Pro. This thing will pretty much, you can hook up your mics to and do a lot of cool things with. It's just really expensive, all right? And it comes with a lot of different bundles. In fact, I can't even find it without an expensive bundle. So I would highly recommend not buying this because it is not needed. You do not need to buy a $700 board. And then lastly, you're going to need XLR cables, most likely, to achieve that XLR connection. Most of them are pretty cheap. Honestly, you can't really go bad with your cable connection. If you're moving them a lot, then maybe do some research at buying some premium ones. But most likely, you're just going to have it set up and not move it or do some slight use to it. And you know what? Bonus, I wasn't going to include this, but everybody likes to have their sets look pretty sleek, all right? And there's one thing that I love to have in my podcast sets. It can splash a little bit of light and do some really cool effects. And I'm going to suggest it, and it is the Govee floor lamp. All right, these guys. I love these lights. Okay, they're actually on sale. Again, check all these prices because they might go on sale. You can buy in black or silver. It's controlled by an app. You can do gradient. I generally don't, actually. But I actually saw these on some professional YouTubers, and it looks great on camera. And I use them just to splash a little bit of light into sets. And that's it for all the hardware. No more intense things to understand. Most people, again, get hung up on this one aspect of recording your podcast. It is not that difficult because I just explained it all to you. You have a full understanding of what's going on. Outside of hardware, you're going to have to understand software, okay? And if you're recording remotely with guests, you're going to have to pick a software to use to record with them. For instance, you can use Zoom. It's probably the easiest one to understand. Or you can use apps like StreamYard or Riverside, which I both love those. And what I actually use now is Podcastle, which is built out exactly for podcast recording. Each of these, again, you're going to probably have to pay for, whatever their monthly subscription may be for the plan that you want. And if you're recording in a room with your guest or co-host, you're going to have to understand how you're going to record your mics. Again, I mentioned all those mics. There's different ways to record them, like the Rode Pod mic you can record on your phone, or you're going to have to buy Logic for your computer to plug your mics in through USB, whatever it may be. Make sure you have an understanding of those softwares and those prices, all right? Outside of that, you're good to go, all right? So I'll see you in the next section.